who your dragons are? Your dragons are your best friend and your biggest fan. Well, that's a whole other process. Plus, do you really want everybody in this room to know about your dragon? Because it knows all of your deepest, darkest secrets. When I do dragon drawings for people, they're very, very personal things. And I tend to be pretty serious about it's a one-on-one thing. Don't bring your family. Don't bring your friends, your kids. No, it's not always appropriate.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, kicking off the con in wonderful spirits. We're going live. It's like NASA. Welcome, everybody, to this interview panel. I'm so excited to see all of your faces out here today. Today we have the amazing opportunity to get to talk to our artist guest of honor, Rob Carlos. Big welcome for Rob. We're so excited.
Thank you.
Just to introduce myself to you real quick, I am your interviewer today. My name is Brittany Torres. I am an artist in the art show and a panelist here at Norwescon. I've been coming here for many years, and it is my local and my favorite con. So I am thrilled to get to be interviewing Rob today. And we have lots of questions for him lined up.
I'm so nervous.
Well,
You're going to find out all the big secrets.
We're just going to dive right in, shall we?
This is my local and favorite con as well, so it's quite an honor for me to be up here in front of all of you guys, because this is my family, you know?
Well, Rob, we get your official background in the guidebook app, but I'd love if you could give us a rundown of your experience as an artist, how you got started, how you got into fantasy, because I know you have some classical training as well. So can you just walk us through what that looked like, that journey for you?
Sure. Okay. I do have some schooling training, and I started getting oil painting classes when I was, I believe, 8 years old, in this old lady's basement about 5 blocks from where we lived, and it was unventilated, and it was terrible. There was, I want to say like 7 or 8 other old ladies learning from this one old lady, and then me. And I'm painting Mickey Mouse and Spider-Man and all these things, and they're just like, okay, let the kid do whatever he's going to do, and we'll do our classical landscapes, and And then I went to art school. I went to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, for fine arts and illustration for a couple of years, and that was fun. But it wasn't learning at my pace, and I've discovered that I'm a little faster than a lot of teachers like to teach. So I started kind of going off and learning on my own and finding people who would mentor me, and that was a lot of work. It was not easy back then to find a mentor. Not sure it is now either, but there's a lot more social media stuff that allows you to do things like that, like we discussed. My first actual foray into professional fantasy art was for the Robert Jordan Wheel of Time series, the trading card game that they did of that.
So no big deal.
Oh yeah, just
no big
a
deal.
little
My
thing.
first fantasy art was for the Wheel of Time.
There was a trading card game that was done about, I want to say 24, 25 years ago. And they outsold Pokemon for a month, and that was a huge deal. They were like, look, we're in the magazine above Pokemon. We're number 1, and they're number 2. It was pretty amazing, and I got in that because I paint really fast. There were a few artists that, just run-of-the-mill artists like Larry Elmore and Clyde Caldwell, like the little guys like that, just enormous people in the field, who were given a huge pile of paintings to do and nowhere near enough time in the schedule to do them. So when they had to let 2 or 3 of their paintings go from the schedule, the company was like, hey, Rob, do these. You have a week. And so I did 11 paintings for their first card game in a week.
What a way to just dive right in
Yeah,
to it.
it was nuts. It was nuts. And I learned a lot about commercial professional art in that project because it's not always about getting the perfect image. It's about getting the image the art director wants.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of trading back and forth about things like that, which can be a little uncomfortable as a creative person sometimes, but at the same time, it's awfully enjoyable to watch that product hit the shelves and everybody starts grabbing them up like by the hundreds.
So
To
what'd you
say
go
that we
after?
bought a couple of card packs would be a very, very massive understatement. We got
So
a
what do you
boxes.
do after that kind of huge project? Like, where did you go?
There was a company out of Canada that was producing a role-playing game, and they had commissioned Julie Bell to do the cover of it. But she was only willing to do the cover. She was not looking to do a bunch of interior illustrations. And as you can see, looking at the pencil drawings going on the projection over there, they were looking for black and white illustrations on the inside, and they're like, okay, we need somebody who can just get a pencil out and just draw crazy stuff. And so they commissioned me to do 96 interior illustrations for their book. And they were like, you can do that in 3 months. We've got a deal. Okay, yeah. The thing that I decided when I was getting into this in the beginning was take every job if they're willing to pay you what you're worth and then figure out how to do it. And that's like this problem solving. As an artist, half of our job is problem solving, right? So part of problem solving is answering the question, how am I going to do all of this in such a short time? Luckily, I was called to jury duty. So all of a sudden, I had,
I don't think I've ever heard that before.
right? All of a sudden, I had nothing to do in a room full of people but doodle in my sketchbook. So I brought all of their descriptions with me on printed pages and just drew. I think I must have done 40 or 50 of those illustrations while I was on jury duty. Because I'm just waiting in the waiting pool. I never got picked for a jury, so I didn't have to put that away at all. Sitting in there 8 hours a day, just drawing on the couch in the waiting room. It was perfect.
So it's really interesting because you kind of dove right into fantasy in the commercial, getting hired by these companies.
It was very lucky.
And you do still a lot of commercial jobs and get hired for things, but you do a lot of your own personal artwork, which is a lot of what we see over in the art show right now. So before we dive in more, I wanted to ask, why sci-fi and fantasy? Why these genres? What about it as an artist makes you excited and fall in love with it?
Well, anybody who was at the opening ceremonies last night knows I started drawing because of Spider-Man. My mom got me some Spider-Man comics when I was 3, and I was hooked. The stories, the action, the costumes, all of that just fascinated me. And then I got into all sorts of other things. The superheroes were always a big thing for me, Superman and Batman and Robin, but also Star Trek was a really big thing when I was little. They were in reruns, just barely. It was 1972, 73. And Mr. Spock just blew my mind. So I had to draw him and the Enterprise and all of the aliens and the Lost in Space robot so many times. But that sort of thing just was, it just picked up. It stayed in my head. When I was 9, Star Wars came out. And if you looked at my notebooks when I was in 5th grade, it's just TIE fighters and X-Wing fighters and the Death Star and Darth Vader everywhere. Really bad R2-D2s, but the TIE fighters and X-Wings, you could really tell what they were. I just couldn't get R2 for some reason. And I was really lucky that I was growing up in that time period where sci-fi and fantasy was going through a renaissance. My dad, when he was in the Navy, had read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And when I was 9, he handed me his copy of The Hobbit and said, I have a feeling you're going to like this. And that changed my world. Smaug was was a major, major influence to everything I do right up to this day. Because Smog was an intelligent dragon, not an intelligent humanoid thing that thought the way that we think. Smog was a step beyond humans. As a dragon, his thought process was something that was alien. And Tolkien did that really well. There was something about the way Smog was written that was whimsical and humorous because it was a children's book, but at the same time, it was also so much more competent than a human could think, you know? So that changed the way I saw dragons, because in the media, dragons were big, ferocious, monstrous, man-eating creatures that breathe fire. Smog was all of that, but also very poised and mannered and thoughtful and complex.
I think a lot of the love of fantasy gets introduced at a young age like that, and I think that's amazing. I would love to know how you got introduced to conventions, because you went from, a painting and getting commissioned and a little bit more of that side of things. How did you come over to the convention side, which is where a lot more of fandoms live and this community?
First convention story, I don't know if I've told you this. First convention story, I was 17 years old, and my Dungeons & Dragons friends and I all decided we were going to pack up our bags in New York City and head out to Milwaukee for this thing that they were doing called Gen Con. That was a long time ago. So Gen Con was already huge, though. It was an enormous, enormous thing at the Milwaukee Convention Center. And we met Larry Elmore there, and he had a booth in the dealer's room where he was drawing people's character portraits for them for I want to say $25, $30 each for these beautiful ink drawings of people's characters. Well, I had my Prismacolor pencils with me and a couple of sketchbooks and things, and I'm like, I could be doing this. So my friends and I set up a table in the open gaming area, and I put together a little sign, and I'm like, come here and have me draw your characters for you in full color. Oh, Larry was doing ink drawings, and I was like, I can do them in color because I have my Prismacolors with me. And we spent almost the entire Gen Con up there drawing until security kicked us out. Because clearly, we're 17-year-old kids. We have no idea what the business of this really is. And we didn't realize that you have to pay for a dealer space. You have to have, legitimacy is
You're
necessary.
An entrepreneur.
We were kids. We had no idea. But we made a ton of money. I mean, we paid for our airfare and hotel and all that, I was drawing people's characters for them in the hotel room afterwards and having them come pick them up the next day. And it's just, literally, I must have spent 40 hours that weekend just drawing.
Were you just hooked on the convention?
It was so great.
That?
The energy and the people and everybody was so excited. And we had a table about this big, and there must have been 30 people crowded around wanting to see what I was doing and get something. And here, 17-year-old kid, that goes to your head really quick. I mean, I was not a wise 17-year-old child by any means. And I didn't know the rules, got kicked out by security, all that. But, I had to go around and find all the people that had commissioned me to do things after the table was cleared away. And I was like, I'll come and get you somewhere. We'll look for you. But yeah, the energy of that was just beyond fun. So I wanted to keep doing that. And when I moved to Florida, they had the Volcon conventions down in Florida, were a really big thing. And I'm like, Star Trek's always been a super fun thing for me, so I'm going to do Volcon. And I did the first Volcon I went to, Patrick Stewart was there. And I did a drawing of Patrick Stewart, and I waited on the autograph line, and he signed it. And he's like, oh, this is really good. I'm not going to do my terrible Patrick Stewart impression. But just the fact that, Jean-Luc Picard is telling me that this is good. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm all right at this. I can keep doing it. And then Will Wheaton and Marina Sirtis showed up one year, and I did their portraits, and they signed them. And Will's like, dude, are you local? We need to hang out and play D&D one of these days. And man, I really should have taken him up on that, because that was Will Wheaton playing D&D on Twitch and YouTube right now is a big deal. But people liked it. People who were somebody liked it. And that was a whole eye-opener. Like, maybe I can do this for real. So when Precedence Entertainments called me up and said, we're doing this Wheel of Time thing and we want you to do some cards for it, I was willing to say yes, because I was at the point where people seemed to enjoy it, you know? Mm-hmm. And I was, I guess, confident enough. Confidence is such a huge thing in this industry. If you walk into a job saying, I wonder if I'll be able to pull this off, you probably aren't going to do it, you know? You got to believe that you can, and it's half the battle.
What a great introduction to a con story. I think that should be always an icebreaker at con. It's like, oh, what was your first con?
Yeah.
Like
Gen Con. Just a little one, like Gen Con.
So since we're talking about cons, for members who have been coming to Norwescon for a while, they probably have seen you around Norwescon, most likely in the art show.
I don't hide.
But Rob, you've always been a real key member in the art show, whether you're helping out with the show, helping with sales. You're always there to help and answer questions and give tours. How did you get involved being a part kind of the art show family here at Norwescon?
So much luck. 19 years ago, I came to Norwescon for the first time, and I believe Michael Whalen was set up in the dealer's room, and my wife and I, Jean and I, met him, and we just kind of hit it off, and he needed some art supplies that he hadn't brought with him. And I was like, well, Daniel Smith is just up the road over here. He's, Daniel Smith is here in Seattle? Like, yeah, I get all of my paints from them. Can you and my wife go over to Daniel Smith and I'll give you a list? So the next thing I know, I'm driving Audrey, his wife, to Daniel Smith. And I'm like, this is Michael Whalen's family, and he's my big idol from high school. Like, I grew up, in high school, my art teacher often had us copying paintings that we liked by other artists in a different style. He'd say, pick an artist whose work you love and do it in pointillism, or do it in expressionist, or do it in, and he would give us an assignment like that. And almost every time I chose Michael Whalen, Frank Frazetta, or Boris Vallejo. Those were my go-to three in high school. And now being able to say I've met two of my three, I will never be able to meet Frank, but and hung out with them in to a degree, especially Michael. Michael is the most wonderful guy you can possibly ever imagine. And when your high school idol sees you walking down the street in downtown Seattle and is like, hey, Rob, come on back down here to Starbucks. My family and I are all having coffee, and we want you to come down and hang out with us. My mind was blown. I could not believe that my idol was inviting me to coffee because he saw me walking down the street. Mm-hmm. Like, that he even knew who I was blew my mind. But he remembered that I helped him out at Norwescon. And that year, somebody didn't show up that had paid for a panel. And we were talking to the folks who run the show, and they're still in there doing it. And I'm like, you've got a free space over here. What would it take to get some art hanging here? And they're like, if you can get it here by 8 p.m., you can have that space for however much money they were charging for it at the time. I'm like, oh gosh, what do I have at home that I can do? Okay. I can go to Michael's and buy some quick frames and put some stuff in frames and get it hung up. And I was panicking at that point.
The artist panic before shows.
And my wife had our car at work, and I'm like, how am I going to get from here to home and do all of this? And I did it all on the bus.
Wow.
Like, if you can, I bust over to Michael's, bought a bunch of things, got the frames, brought them back to the house, and put it all together and brought it here. Barely made it by 7:30 to get in under that 8 o'clock deadline. And then I hung 4 pictures up on a panel, and that was my first Norwescon art show. And people seemed to like what I was putting up, so I was like, I think I'll keep doing this. A couple years later, I started volunteering to work at the art show with my wife, and she runs the cashier in there. And I think they chain her to that chair. I don't think they ever let her go. At 8 o'clock, someone comes in and puts the PIN number, and then they release her. But it felt so welcoming. Like Doug looked at what I was hanging, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this looks great. Yeah, you're gonna do fine." And everybody was really like, "You're now part of our family. You're hanging in our art show. You're part of our." And that was very different from Volcon in Florida. And it was very different from Dragon Con and Gen Con and all of the other shows that I'd been to. There's like, everyone's like, you're doing the job, and then check off all of the boxes, and then go and do what you're doing and come back at the end of the show. Where at the art show here, they were like, hang out with us. We're all going to be friends. And that was a game changer. And maybe it's a little bit of the Northwest attitude, or maybe it's a little bit of the Volcon was very, very business. But they also had to deal with having media celebrities and things like that were showing up. So, they're juggling different levels of importance in a show like that. And Gen Con's got like TSR at the time that they were always finagling with, and so that's going to take a level of importance. Here, they put importance on us. Like, we as the con goers are important to Norwescon, and it never feels like that in the East Coast shows, honestly. It's a different thing entirely.
The art show here is always very welcoming and very, I feel like, based on community. And everybody, when I first started showing, was so helpful and answering all my questions.
Yes, like going into Cheers, where everybody knows your name, everybody knows you as soon as you become part of the group.
It's such a great show to get started with in selling your artwork. If you've never sold your artwork before and you're looking for something, this is the art show to do it. And I would know because 11 years ago, I came to Norwescon for the very first time with Rob. I had met him a little bit beforehand, and he said, you should really come, you like this fantasy stuff, you should really come to Norwescon. And I was 17, and I said, what's that? And he said, he's like, come to this convention.
She's this wide-eyed high school kid that comes into a bookstore that I was working at, which was also doubling as my gallery. It was a bookstore downtown Kent where Amy Brown had a gallery space up in the front, and she was sharing that space with me for, I want to say, about 10 years.
Yeah.
And you come in, you're just like this book nerd. You're like, let me see all the books, and there's pictures. And
he's like, you like this fantasy stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I really do. He says, come to this show. And I came for the first time, and I had no idea what a convention was, and everyone was so welcoming, just like we were saying with the art show, with here. But that was 11 years ago, and I was 17, so I did not have a guardian, so Rob adopted me for the weekend.
She's our con daughter.
Very, very kindly. And it changed the whole trajectory of what I did in fantasy.
Look at what you're doing now.
So, yeah, I'm in the art show with you now. I get to be interviewing you
Last
now.
Norwescon, you won first place. You got a nice ribbon on that painting.
Look at him. So that's what I was leading into. He's been my art mentor for over a decade now, and to be able to have the opportunity now to get to interview you, to get to be on panels with you, to get to show in the same show as you has been so exciting. And as a mentor, because I'm not the only one you've mentored, but what is that? How has that played into you and your art journey in teaching others?
Oh, anybody out there that has a particularly amazing skill at something, be a mentor for somebody and teach them that skill. It's the coolest thing, because I'll tell everybody, Brittany won first place last Norwescon, because 2% of that was my fault. And I take so much pride in knowing that I helped get her to that point, even if it was just a grain of sand in the right direction, that all of her artistic success, I helped a little bit in pushing her in that direction. And it's so fun to know that.
He's underselling it. I never would have gone into an art show if you hadn't said, you should do this, you should try this, go
You say
for it."
never, but you had so much drive.
We're talking about you.
So much drive.
But it's so amazing to see, because I think that what we've been talking about, the community of conventions, the community of the art show, is extended by when people like you mentor younger people and bring younger fantasy lovers up in the community.
Well, I love watching the success that happens. I have had the pleasure of seeing some of my students and mentees, I guess, I don't know, mentos, you don't put those in Diet Coke. I've had the pleasure and privilege of seeing some of these people gain extraordinary levels of success, some things where I would aspire to. Like one of my former students, I'm pretty sure she's going to get a job working on The Mandalorian as a costume designer pretty soon. And that's like one of my dreams. Like if I could ever get a gig doing Star Wars, Marvel Comics, Critical Role or Dimension 20, man, I would love to illustrate for any of those things. Or do like practically anything. I would do 3D sculptures for them. That's like you'll see on the thing, there's all sorts of 3D sculptures that just came up that I've been doing. That's my pandemic skill. Anything like that I could do for one of those dream type jobs. Dungeons and Dragons, all of these years later, I still have never done an actual piece for Wizards of the Coast. And I'd love to, but I have no idea whose palms I got to grease to get that deal. I know there's got to be something somewhere, some agent or something that I need to talk to get in that door. It's all luck, honestly. And we all have our dream jobs and we all have our aspirations. It's 95% effort, 5% luck. And if you don't do that if you don't get the 5% luck, you're never going to make it. And that's okay, because there's always going to be other things. But always have your aspirations too. You know, I would still love to work on a Star Wars project. And you know, maybe if she actually gets into this deal, she apprenticed with Shauna Tripsick, who's the costume designer on The Mandalorian. So there's definitely a door open there. And she's like, if I get in, you know I owe you one for getting me to this point. And I'm like, yes, mentor, apprentices. It's the best thing ever. But it's also such a good feeling to see what the people that I've helped accomplish and bring into the world. It's something I would have never done myself. You know, everybody's got their own style, and I look at these things and I'm like, I can see a little bit of what I showed you across the board here, but you brought so many more new things that I would never have thought of, and the world just needs more of it. And it's happening.
I think it's just a huge testament to your skills in artwork, and you're a wonderful teacher, I know firsthand, but also the skills and techniques that you have that you bring to that as well. You have a very unique and very, very you art style. Like I can look across the room at the art show and without knowing it, pick out a Rob Carlos piece. What would you say sets you apart with your style?
Wow. I wonder if any artist can answer that question. There's something about style that's intentional. And then there's something about style that happens because you're you. And nobody, I think, is really self-aware enough to know what it is about them that is that different and unique. I think it has to come from the observer more than the creator when it comes to that. And the creator has something to do with it. Like, I do dragons a certain way, and that happens because of my relationship with dragons. And it's not the same way Michael Whalen does it. It's not the same way Todd Lockwood does it. Now, we all influence each other, you know, and that's cool, but there's something about my dragons that are recognizable, and anyone that sees them knows it, even though each one is very different looking. I'm not sure why. I don't know. It's just a thing that happens. When I paint a person or I paint a landscape or whatever, I'm doing it my way, and I guess everybody's imagination triggers their style without them knowing it. that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I could be totally wrong about all of this too. Don't be surprised if everything you hear today is wrong.
The wonderful thing about art is there is no right answer.
That's right.
It is just fully a conversation. So, but in continuing that conversation, so often you are referred to as the dragon guy.
Yep.
You are known for your dragons, for the pieces that we see, the planet dragons, people's personal dragons that you draw. And you talked a little bit about the influences of in fantasy that you love with dragons, like with Smog and with other artists too. But I wanted you to maybe tell us a little bit about being the dragon guy.
Oh my. Do we have time for that discussion? That's such a huge talk. I have a condition. It's something that I was taught to do because a very good friend of mine, who I don't know who remembers Christine Winters. She used to come here all the time. Extraordinary psychic woman. She was one of my best friends ever, and I think she was maybe my wife's sister from another life or something. She would tell us things, and they would always happen. She was literally the most psychic person I've ever met, and I can be pretty skeptical about stuff like that, but anytime Christine told me something, I listened. And one day, not long before she passed, she looked at me and said, "Why aren't you drawing the dragons you see around people?" And I said, "Christine, that sounds like total insanity, but because you said it, I have to listen. What are you talking about?" And we spent 6 months doing eye exercises that hurt like crazy at first, and I slowly but surely got a little more comfortable with them. And she was teaching me how to do consciously what I was already doing subconsciously. Because she went through my portfolio and showed me, she's like, this is when you lived with your mother and father, and this is when you moved out to college, and this is when you had these roommates. And she showed me things in my portfolio based on the dragons I was painting and how they changed. And she said, the reason they're changing is because of the people in your life and who you're surrounded by. And you're seeing their dragons and you don't know it, and they're influencing your art. Like, okay, now I'm sold. Tell me more. Explain this whole thing to me. And she taught me how to see them. One day I was at her home and I was doing these eye exercises, and I looked at her and there was this sort of weird triangular luminescence behind her that wasn't really in the room. And I'm like, Christine, I'm seeing this thing. She's like, draw what you see right now. Quick, 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 draw it. And I started sketching it, and she's like, look at you, you just drew my dragon's head. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, that's my dragon's head, and I've been seeing it all my life, and now you're seeing it too, on purpose. Congratulations. And like, that was a game changer. Like, I continued to do these exercises, and I slowly got to see the neck and the shoulders and the wings, and now I can see anybody's dragon anytime I look at them. I barely even have to do the weird eye thing with my focus range, because it just pops up when I look at this whole audience and see all of your dragons. And the dragons are our best friends and our biggest fans. They're some sort of higher dimensional being that watches our stories. And they have the ability, because they're a higher dimensional being, to change the way they look in a way that means something to the people who see them, like me. And now my wife Jean sees them when I draw them. And we can interpret that and figure out things about a person based on their dragon. So everybody has seen the Norwescon, the two dragons that are on the side and kind of looking off at the Grand Canyon in the distance. They've been using it in the other panel rooms and on brochures and stuff. That's Barack and Michelle Obama's dragons. And thank you. I totally forgot this. People, when I posted that picture on Facebook, I said, without posting it publicly, everybody guess who this couple is. It's a famous couple. You all know who they are. This is not anyone obscure, but I didn't say who I had painted. I just put up the painting, and I had some people say, oh, it's Brad and Angelina. I'm like, no, okay. Literally, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. This is a couple you know. I'm not hiding anything from anybody. And I had a couple of odd things guessed, And then all of a sudden, all at once, I had 17 direct messages from people like, oh, it's Barack and Michelle Obama. 17 people in a day. And with maybe 4 or 5 incorrect guesses, like everybody got it. And I was like, okay, so this is cool. There's something about them, like, they connect with us and they want to connect with us. And once I draw them for people, it establishes a tighter connection between the person and their dragon observer. And then they wants to give you advice. It wants to give you information about your life and yourself. And they live in higher dimension. So they see the 4th dimension like we see the 3rd dimension. We see this table, it's 3-dimensional. They see the 4th dimension, it's the past and the future all at once. So when they give us advice, we should listen because they know what's going to happen and what's good. I think a lot of psychic things, a lot of psychic phenomena might have something to do with them. There's a lot of theories. I've read a bunch of people's theories. I've been trying to come up with theories of my own, and it has to do with quantum physics and all sorts of stuff, because I try to figure stuff out, problem solving like artists do. But yeah, there's something about dragons in me that are, I have no idea what I'm doing when I do this. I was trained, but maybe I was trained to make my pattern recognition engine make something out of nothing. Or maybe I was trained in a way that developed a sense of aphantasia in my head, so now I'm seeing things that aren't there. But it seems to always work. Mm-hmm. And when I have discussions with people about what their dragons are telling me, I mean, so many people have burst into tears, like, how did you know that? And, yes, that happened 17 years ago. How could you know? I'm like, your dragon is telling me stuff. I'm just giving you what they tell me, And I want to say, okay, maybe it's a little bit of a psychic thing, but maybe it's just paying attention. And they really want to tell people stuff. They're our biggest fans. They want the person that they're a fan of to know. Mm-hmm. So they're pushing through. They're using me as a way of doing that. And it's kind of amazing.
Your artwork really connects with people, even if they've never seen it before. So much of your artwork that we see over in the art show right now that you can go buy.
Hit plug.
People have an emotional attachment often to your artwork, and I think that is one of the reasons too, is that you also really care about your audience and care about the people who buy your work, and I think that's an amazing connection. I think you have.
That's part of why I try to shy away from a lot of the art-directed projects. I mean, there's some that I would love to do. Like I said, I'll take Star Wars or Marvel Comics any day. But at the same time, there's always going to be a stronger connection if I'm painting what I love, and hopefully the people who see it understand I love it and they'll love it too. Mm-hmm. When you're doing a commercial project, you can only put 80% of your love into that at any point, where if you're painting something out of your heart, you can give it 100%. I mean, I've seen people who are commercial painters for big projects that, like Ryan Meanderding, he's the guy who does all the visual design for Marvel Comics. I got a chance to hang out and talk to him for a day, and it was a total game changer. And he loves Marvel Comics so much that when he does design for them, it's 100% every single time. And he loves the people he works with too. I mean, how much gushing he did over Kevin Feige, I can't even begin to tell you. He's like, it's the best human being you can possibly ever have as a boss is Kevin Feige. It's if you can ever have that guy as a boss, do it immediately. So being able to work for somebody that is just amazing, that you are giving your honor to by giving them the product of your talent is a goal and a dream. Like, everybody should try to do that, and your life will be so much happier. But personal stuff, I can always do 100%. Mm-hmm. It's painting what you love, people will love that. And I just got done with this whole art battle thing that was an awful lot of fun. If you ever get a chance to look up Art Battle on YouTube, it's amazing. I got into the finals here in Seattle, and just unbelievable artists painting the fastest you've ever seen. They give you a big canvas and say, you have 20 minutes, go, paint a thing. And it's super stressful, but it also is a crazy measure of your talent. And when I say during the finals, I looked around at some of the other people and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to win. Holy cow, these are amazing, amazing painters.
How motivating, though.
Yeah, it was such a great experience. But we all got it together in the back room and we were talking about how do we do this to make the most out of 20 minutes. And we all kind of had to agree the only way you can do that is you have to just pour love on the canvas. It's all just, and you have to paint what makes your soul happy. And if you try to paint for the audience, you're only going to be able to give it 80%. You've got to paint for yourself, and you've got to just pour it all on there at once. And if you just open your heart and let it happen, the people who are watching will feel it. They'll get it, and they'll understand that that was something that was capturing a moment of your pure joy in time, and they're gonna wanna appreciate that.
We've gotten to hear so much from you today, and I could ask you a million more questions.
It's a lot.
But I want to make sure we have time for questions from the audience.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I've got one last question for you, Rob.
Okay.
So, like we talked about before, this is your local con. You've been coming here for a long time and loving every minute of it. And now we get to walk around the convention, and on signs and on posters and on my name tag, I see your art everywhere.
Crazy, right?
And you have been volunteering in the art show for a long time. You are a pillar of Norwescon, and I just want to know, how are you, as we kick off the weekend on Friday today, how are you feeling being the guest of honor artist today?
I'm hoping at some point this weekend I can tone down my excitement enough to sleep. That didn't happen last night.
You need me to pinch you? It's real. It's happening.
Holy cow. Yeah, I mean, I kind of told them, work me as hard as you can. Put me on as many panels or whatever as you can, because I got to have something to do, because I'm not going to be able to sleep all weekend. I'm sure of it. I'll lay in bed for like 5 hours and stare at the black ceiling and be like, okay, now I got to get up and do something. Last night I was up really late working on the sketch for the demo painting that I'm going to be doing here at 4 p.m. I'm going to paint the guest of honors as a Dungeons and Dragons group. And last night we all met at the opening ceremonies, and I got a chance to photograph all of them and talk to them about what kind of character they would want to be. And now I've got a 22 by 28 canvas in the room, all sketched out. I got a pencil sketch done, and then I went over it all with a Sharpie, and it's good to go. So
even as the guest of honor, he's still working.
Oh, I'm going to work my butt off this week. That's the goal. I just want to, well, this is the convention that I love, and I want to give you guys everything I absolutely can in the 4 days that we get to spend together. And it's going to go really fast, and it's going to be a whirlwind, and then it's going to all be over on Sunday, and it will be terrible. But we want to make sure everybody's got something out of it. And I've got prints in the print shop of the Carpathian Sentinel, the piece that I did for the Ukraine World Central Kitchen Foundation. There's these little mini prints in there, and help yourself to one. Everybody can have one. And then at autograph time, I'll sign them all for you. Because I want to give this convention everything I can. And I know it's been a crazy couple of years, and not all of us are super financially flush. So if you need a souvenir, go and get one of my dragon prints, and anybody can have one, and I'll sign it for you, and maybe do a little doodle or something. And yeah, just have me work. I'm all up to it. And stop me if you see me hanging out in the coffee shop or whatever, and talk. And we can just chat about things, or do a little doodle for you, because I'm walking around with a sketchbook all day, all night. yeah, I want to just give you guys everything I can because I'm so honored to be here.
It's been amazing getting to see your artwork around, and your display in the art show looks absolutely
Thank you.
beautiful, front and center as it should be. But as your interviewer and as a fellow art show member, but also as your mentee, I would just like to say congratulations on being the guest of honor artist at 2022 Norwescon.
Thank you.
So we might have time for a quick question or two. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Here we go. Oh, hi. Almost everything I paint in digital is Photoshop. I know a lot of people like Procreate and Painter and things like that. I started using Photoshop with version 2 over 20 years ago, before there were layers and things, so I kind of just love it. I was very lucky that back in 2019, my wife found a Black Friday deal on a Cintiq. So I have a Wacom Cintiq that I get to paint on now. I used to just use like an Intuos tablet. So about 2/3 of what you see in the art show is off of the Intuos tablet. But all my recent stuff has been on that Cintiq, and boy, the drawing on that is so nice. And then for the 3D things, I've been sculpting in ZBrush for the past 2 years. So ZBrush is really, it's got a very steep learning curve. The first couple of weeks that you use it, you're going to be like, okay, I have a ball. What do I do with this? Glob, glob, glob. And you pull out things out of the ball, and it looks like garbage. And then all of a sudden, you're going to figure out how the tools are really supposed to work, and you watch a whole bunch of YouTube videos, like 70 hours of YouTube videos. No kidding, 70 hours. And it starts to make a little bit of sense. And then the next thing you know, you can sculpt people and give them costumes and swords and armor and all of the things. And it's super fun.
Exciting and motivating.
And then you can
Always
print
doing
them on
something
those
new.
3D resin printers. If you look in my area, there's this little table set up in the front, and it's got these two little figures, and those are my D&D characters and my wife's D&D character that I sculpted in ZBrush. And then my neighbor printed them out for me on her resin printer. That's really, really nice. And it's amazing what the computer will let you do in the real world now, you know?
Do we have any other questions?
Somebody's got to ask something.
Just means that we did a great interview.
We covered all the bases. Yay!
Well, Rob will always be available for your questions. Find him at the art show, at panels.
Your questions were fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
You asked everybody everything.
I live 10 minutes away from him, so I'm always bothering him with questions and getting help with things. So
Yes, I think Brittany spends more time in my studio than just about anybody other than me.
But that's how we learn. So
Yes.
we learn from the best. So thank you, everyone, so much for coming to this interview today. And just a big thank you to Rob for being our guest of honor artist this year.
And welcome back to in-person conventions, right?
Yay!
Hey. It's so nice to see all of your faces out there again and not on a screen.
Thank you, guys, and have a great rest of your weekend.